Good morning, Boker Tov. Welcome to Kolel Ahavat Israel. Today, like every Tuesday, Baruch Hashem, Shabbat Kodesh, we do a special class for Partners in Torah. As we mentioned before, Baruch Hashem Partners in Torah is an organization that reaches over 1,500 cities worldwide. There's every week many Rabbanim, Baruch Hashem scholars, teachers, both male and females, teach all over the world. And as usual, Be'ezat Hashem, like every time, we want to say thank you and pay gratitude to our sponsors, Mr. and Mrs. Selwyn Isako, Be'ezat Hashem, from Partners in Torah. Kadosh Baruch Hu will merit him to continue to go from strength to strength, from Chayil to Chayil, Be'ezat Hashem. We want to thank all of you for being with us online. Please do share this with everybody, our class, so we can reach as many people as possible. We want to thank the Baruch family, Be'ezat Hashem. We want to thank Baruch and Zehavit, Refuah Shlema Be'ezat Hashem, to both of them, Baruch Chai ben Chaya Miriam, Refuah Shlema to Zehavit Batova. We also want to say thank you to the Harush family. Thank you to the Almog family, needforbuild.com, the Kransky family, the Leaf family, the Azulai family, and the Janach family. I thank you so much for all your support and helping continue our growth on spreading Torah. Baruch Hashem. We also want to announce today we have a new rabbi joined the Kollel on a weekly basis. Is Rabbi Meir Dahan. He's the director of Rabbi Meir Balanes in Tiberias, in the Sea of Galilee. He gives weekly classes from his new book, Agadat de Rabbi Meir Balanes. Please join us. Baruch Hashem, right now we have 8 rabbis. There's a lot of their classes on our Facebook and YouTube and on our website. Please do share with everybody. All right. After all that, we want to also dedicate this to, in honor of the memorial and yard site. 18 years ago, yesterday, our astronaut Ilan Ramon, Zichrono Livracha, was killed with his fellow men and women at the Columbia shuttle. That was exactly on February 1st, 2003, 18 years ago. It was amazing. Just a quick story about him in his honor. He wanted to keep Shabbat in space. Ilan Ramon asked and called, and they had one of the rabbis in Israel did not know the answer, so they checked with NASA, and NASA said every 16 and a half hours you need to keep Shabbat an hour and a half. That's the rotation of the shuttle around the world, and a week is about 16 and a half hours. And that's what he did. And Ilan Ramon took with him the so-called Tanakh from his grandfather from the Holocaust, and he studied on Shabbat. And interestingly enough, unfortunately, when the shuttle came to the atmosphere of Earth right above Texas, it was exactly on Knisat Shabbat. It was exactly when the Shabbat came in over Texas, and that's when the Columbia shuttle was unfortunately destroyed, and Ilan Ramon and his fellow men and women have vanished. But as we know, our goof is temporary, our neshama is forever, and Began Eden Nishmato. Okay, so Partners in Torah, again, the class is Parashat Yitro, and as usual, we speak a little bit today about the essence and the power of one man to be honored, to have his name as one of the portion of the Torah. None other than the most important parasha of the Torah, to say the least, if not one of the most, maybe one of among few others. The whole Torah, of course, is one parasha, but this portion is the portion of the Ten Commandments. Receiving of the Ten Commandments, we know that this is one of the most important times, and the promise that Hashem promised the people of Israel, promised to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And on this parasha, which is, again, Ma'amad Har Sinai, which is the most divine moment in the life of the people of Israel that came out of Egypt. They saw things that nobody saw. They felt things that nobody felt. It was the perfect time, as if the time of Adam Arishon, first Adam, before the sin. It was the perfection of creation. So it says, וישמע יתרו כהן מדיין חותן משה את כל אשר עשה אלוהים למשה ולישראל עמו, כי הוציא אדוני את ישראל ממצרים. So it says that Yitro heard. So we know what Yitro heard and who is Yitro. Just a little bit of history of Yitro, as we mentioned, maybe if you heard or not, but Yitro is actually one of the grandson of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu married for the third time a woman named Keturah after Sarah passed away at 127. Avraham was 137, and he married a woman named Keturah. The Kabbalah says that she was Hagar. Just again, she converted one more time because she left after Ishmael wanted to kill Yitzchak, and Sarah says to Abraham, throw them out of here. Of course, Hashem says, what are you asking me? Listen to Sarah. And Shema Bekol Sarah. And as we know, later on, he married Keturah, and Keturah had 6 children. And as we know, among the 6 children, one of them was Midian. Midian, as we know, is now the nation of Yitro. And as we mentioned, the Gemara says that the children of Avraham Avinu has to be circumcised. It's part of the halacha. As we know, he circumcised Ishmael, the son of Hagar. She was none other than the princess of Egypt that Pharaoh gave to Avraham and Sarah. And as we know, he circumcised Ishmael when he was 13 years old. After he circumcised himself, Avraham Avinu was 99 years old. Ishmael was 13. And of course, Yitzchak was circumcised after the 8 days. But from the children of Avraham, they said that even the grandkids has to be circumcised. There is a machloket about this in the Gemara. But after all said and done, Yitro came from Midian. As we know, when Pharaoh and his 3 advisors, which was Yitro, Eov, and Bilam, Job, they actually was discussing how we're going to destroy the people of Israel. So let's outsmart them and start destroying them. And as we know, when the decision come to kill them either by drowning or to kill them either by sword or fire, Yitro left. Yitro immediately left, did not agree with this so-called Holocaust in Egypt, and he left. He says, I'm not going to be part of this. Because of that, Yitro was rewarded with amazing greatness, both to be the so-called father-in-law of Isha Elohim. Moshe, Hashem calls him Isha Elohim. Moshe and Yitro knew each other for 27 years in Egypt. Moshe was the prince at the time. And when Moshe left, he was 40, and he went to Midian as he met Tzipporah at the bar, right? The Be'er, water, B-A-R, different kind of water, holy water. And of course, when he came to the house of Yitro, Yitro saw that he is the right man, meaning that he was able to take out the staff of Hashem that Yitro took with him. And he said, this is a holy man, and I known him. I saw him in his action, and I saw what he did for his brothers in Egypt. And he basically gave him Tzipporah, his daughter. By the way, the word Tzipporah and Le Moshe, the Shidduch, is actually exactly, they both equal 375 in Gematria. Tzipporah without the letter Vav. So he says here, Vaishmator, what did he hear? So, of course, we know he heard about all the miracles that happened in Egypt. He heard about the 10 plagues. He heard about the splitting of the sea, the water, really, not the sea. They say, Vaibaku amayim, when the water split, is the whole water in the world split. In every river, every sea, every bowl of soup, every cup of water, every water in the world split. The Kabbalah says, what the splitting of the water is really, Moshe was taught what water elements are. H2O, as we know, H2, which is hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen has 8 parts, and hydrogen has 2 parts. And as we know, Moshe Rabbeinu will later on after the water split, what happened? They will receive the 10 Commandments, and Moshe and Hashem will be part of this. But we'll see here that the YITRO Shama, it says, the Baal HaTurim says Vayishma YITRO, the acronym of Vayishma is Vayishma YITRO Shenitzchu Milchemet Amalek. You know, he heard that first and foremost, the people of Israel came out of Egypt, and he knew that nobody could ever come out of Egypt. You know, the magician of Egypt, both Bilam and his two sons, Unius and Umbrius, and the other magician, they were able to just put spells all over the border of Egypt, and nobody could, you know, there's no jails with so-called walls or fences or you know, jail cells. There's nothing like that. The fear and the spell of black magic that they put on Egypt, not even one slave could escape. Nobody wanted to, and if they did, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, an animal like a lion or a bear will jump and kill them. There was such a fear, and they knew, YITRO says, nobody can get out of this kind of, if the people of Israel did, there must be higher God than this kind of magician, this kind of God that Pharaoh claimed to be. So he heard that, and he heard, of course, that the people of Israel defeated Amalek. And who's Amalek? As we know, Amalek, by the way, is the grandson of Esav, the brother of Yaakov. He had one of his Pelegish at the time that wanted to convert, named Timnah. Timnah was actually a sister of Eliphaz. Eliphaz was the son of Esav, and we know he sent Eliphaz to kill Yaakov, and of course Yaakov and Eliphaz learned Torah together with Yitzchak, and Yaakov was able to persuade him just to take his fortune and his clothes and not to kill him. And from Eliphaz, he slept with his sister Timnah, and Timnah, before that, she wanted to convert. When she saw that Yaakov defeated Esav and came back and Lavan, she wanted to convert, and Yaakov did not allow her. And she wanted to take revenge on the people of Yaakov. So she sent, after she married her brother, Eliphaz, they had 6 children, and one of them was Amalek. And she said to him, you go to Egypt and you wait for the right time when they're not with Hashem in the place of Refidim. Refidim is Rapuya Dehem. They basically had 3 days without God. And you'll be able to defeat them. That's the only time you can defeat the people of Israel. What's Amalek? As we mentioned, Amalek is basically an acronym, Am Moel Lo Kadosh. When the people of Israel betray Hashem, they're not holy, and other nations can come and defeat them. And that's happened to us many times in the past, not just from one nation. Amalek came in a variety of nations in history, from Pharaoh to Amalek, all the way to Holocaust, and God forbid, who knows. So we know that now Pharaoh heard, YITRO heard all this, and he says, wow, YITRO, as we know, he was basically tried every idolatry possible in the world. And he saw that the people of Israel had all these amazing miracles and successes that no other so-called God could do. And as we know, YITRO had 7 names. Rashi will mention that in our parasha. His 7 names were Reuel, Yeter, YITRO, Chovav, Chever Kini, and Putiel. You know, the word YITRO has many connotations to it, many explanations to it. The word YITRO means yoter, to add. He will add a lot to the people of Israel and to his son-in-law Moshe. YITRO also yevater, mean he will give up his religion. And of course, Vayishma is what we call Vayoshia, is really Yeshua, from the word Moshiach. We know that YITRO understood that the people of Israel are very much will be saved from any other God, because their God is much bigger. And as we know, we mentioned here one of his name, by the way, is Chever Hakini. Chever Hakini is mentioned one more time in the book of Shoftim, in the book of Judges, when Cicero was running away from Devorah and Barak ben Avinoam, and he went to the tent of Yael. Yael, as we know, her husband was Chever Hakini. That was one of the grandsons of YITRO. And Yael, as we know, she was a very, very much righteous woman and a hero. And when Cicero came to her tent, the Kabbalah says that he actually raped her 7 times. And because of that, she killed him, as we know. She gave him milk, he fell asleep, and she killed him. She took a stake of the tent and ran it through his so-called raka, and she basically killed him. But the Zohar Kadosh says, why did Cicero came upon Yael? What was the purpose of that? Because, nothing happened. There's no coincidence. Everything has an amazing reason. So the Zohar says, from Cicero and Yael will come Yosef, and that will be the father of Rabbi Akiva. Yosef will convert. The grandson of Cicero and Yael will be none other than Rabbi Akiva. Because of him, we have the entire oral Torah in the world. He is the one that took, after losing 24,000 students of the Torah, he took 5 others. As we mentioned, he took the 5 Rabbanim that really, the essence of everything that we know today and everything that we basically understood. And these 5 Talmidim that Rabbi Akiva put is none other than Rabbi Yossi ben Chalfata, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He wrote, by the way, Rabbi Shimon has delivered the Zohar to us. He did not write it. He taught it and dictated to the people to write it around him. The other one was Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, then Harav Yehuda bar Ilai, and he was, by the way, the head of the Mishnah, so to speak. And those are the people, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, which gathered the Mishnayot and put together the Gemara, the Talmud. 5 giants that, came from really, thanks to Cicero, by his grandson, Rabbi Akiva. So we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says here that Yitro, he heard something, and the Torah called him both Kohen Midian and Choten Moshe, meaning that even though he was the priest of Midian, meaning the number 1 idolatry after TORAH, Abraham Avinu's father, that was brought back to heaven by Abraham. So Yitro knew every Avodah Zarah, but he gave up all this in order to be Choten Moshe, in order to be with the, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Vasimcha and Moshe, I will place you as Elohim al Mitzrayim. You'll be, the God of Egypt. So I said, wow, Moshe now is the God of Egypt. And furthermore, he is really Isha Elohim in the eyes of the only God. So we know that he says, Vaikach Yitro Choten Moshe Tzipora Eshet Moshe Achar Shiluchea. So another thing to why Yitro says, the Torah says, Vayishma Yitro, he heard something else. So Yitro heard that Moshe Rabbeinu is not a Kohen. As we know, Moshe Rabbeinu was punished in Mount Sinai when Hashem gave him the instruction to take out the people of Israel. And one of the punishment that he received is not to be a Kohen. Originally, he was supposed to be the Kohen. He was supposed to be everything, the king, the Kohen, the head rabbi, the Moshiach. But because he actually, out of humility, says, take my father or my brother. So his brother became the Kohen, but Moshe remained a Levite. And as we know, a Kohen cannot marry his divorcee. He cannot marry a widow. He cannot marry a lot of few other women. And as we know, Yitro heard that, says, okay, I'm going to bring Tzipora and the 2 children to Achar Shiluchea, because she was divorced. As we know, the Gemara will tell us that Moshe Rabbeinu actually, he was together for about 80 years with Tzipora. But out of those 80 years, he was only married to her for 3 years. And he had the 2 children, Gershom and Eliezer. And now Yitro says, I'm bringing it back to you. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe on, the Mount Sinai, he says, remove your shoes. Shal na'alecha me'araglecha. The Gemara tells us that means to get divorced. You have to be 100% of the time pure, because I'm going to speak to you face to face. And a man is in marriage has to always go, to a mikvah, and when he's with his wife, he's not pure thereafter. So one of the instructions is to leave Tzipora. So we know the Torah says something amazing. The Torah will tell us who are the 2 children, but they will actually separate them. The Torah will say, Et shnei banei asher shema echad, Gershom, because I was a ger in Eretz Nochriya, Veshema ha'echad Eliezer. It doesn't say the second son, it says the first one on both. So as we know, the Gemara will tell us that, in the Gemara will say that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the heaven to Hashem to teach him a lot of the elements of what he's about to teach the people of Israel, anywhere from, everything, Moshe Rabbeinu received the entire Torah. And he says in the Gemara that when he was there, he heard, it says this, by the way, this is in the Gemara, Rabbi Acha b'shem Rabbi Yossi ber Chanina Omer, he says that Rabbi Acha, in the name of Rabbi Yosef, the son of Chanina, says, בשעה שעלה משה למרום, שמע קולו של הקדוש ברוך הוא יושב ועוסק בפרשת פרה אדומה, והלכה בשם אומרה, אליעזר בני אומר, עגלה בת שנתה ופרה בת 2. הקדוש ברוך הוא, learning Torah, as we know, third of the time הקדוש ברוך הוא learned Torah with the angels and the Rabbanim and the Shamot there. And he says, Hashem says, my son taught me an halacha. Moshe was astonished. He says, Hashem, you learn from your children? He says, yes, there is a guy that will come to the world. His name will be Eliezer. And he taught me an halacha, and he's right. The para aduma has to be 2 years old. And the Rabbanim says 3. And I agree with him. He taught me this halacha. And this is, by the way, none other. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, I want this son to be from my tribe, to be from my tzeitzaim. And Hashem says, I'll give him to you. And it's none other than Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenus. And as we know, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenus, he was the student, he was one of the first Tanaim, and he was basically what we call the student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, giant of giants. They say that he was so enamored with Torah that, everything above him will burn. Let's say a bird flew above him, she'll burn. It was such a powerful tzínor, a conduit to the entire world. And his number one student was none other than Rabbi Elazar ben Hurkenus, and he called him Bor Sod She'eno Me'abed Tipa. He says he was the wisest of all. Not everything that he learned remained, and not even a drop would come from his knowledge. And we know that in the future, this Rabbi Elazar ben Hurkenus really be right about everything that he said. So we continue now. YITRO says, Vayavo YITRO Choten Moshe. By the way, we mentioned here many times the word Choten. Choten means father-in-law. It's really as a secret. The code of Choten is what we call if you take the word Choten, Chet, Taf, Nun, is 458 in numerical code in Gematria. And really, because of YITRO joining the people of Israel, Moshe gave him Nachalat Binyamin until Beit HaMikdash will be built. He says to him, you come with us, your children will come with us to Israel, and we'll give you a portion of Beit HaMikdash until he be built. It will take 458 years later, and that's exactly where the children of Yitro were residing in Israel until there was Beit HaMikdash with Nachalat Binyamin. So we know here that it comes to, it says, Vayavo YITRO Chotem Moshe v'ishto el Midbar, and it says, Vayomer el Moshe, Ani chotancha YITRO ba'elecha. So here YITRO comes and says, listen, I am your father-in-law. Question is asked, what do you mean I'm your father-in-law? Of course Moshe knows that. Why does YITRO says that? So the Baal HaTurim and the Arizal bring something amazing. If you take the 3 words, Ani chotancha YITRO, I am your father-in-law, in Hebrew spells the word Achi, my brother. The Zohar Kadosh says, and the Arizal bring that, and the Baal HaTurim, they said that YITRO was telling Moshe, we used to be brothers. I used to be Cain, you used to be Hevel. Achi, you are my brother. And as you know, I murdered you because I was, and I took one of your sisters to be my wife. And that's the Tzipora. And I'm coming here now to do a tikkun. I'm here to basically fix this chet, this murder. And I am and you and Zipporah are the same people as Cain, Hevel, and your wife. And I'm bringing her back to you now. And the Zohar Kadosh says, by doing that, he did the tikkun. And we know that Cain, by the way, if you haven't heard, Cain lived the longest out of all mankind in the history of the world. Cain lived 1,500 years. His tshuva was so good that Hashem was willing to forgive him for murder. 1,500 years, by the way, he was later on would be killed by the grandfather of Noach, Lemech. And we know that he, right now, is Yitro and Moshe is Hevel. How do we know Moshe is Hevel? You know, Moshe is reincarnation of three. Mem, Moshe, the Hainu Mashiach. Hey, right? And Shin. Shin is Shem, Moshe, Shet, and Hevel. I'm sorry, not Shem. Shet, the son of Adam that was holy. So we know that really Moshe Rabbeinu is a reincarnation of those three. And later on, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, will be reincarnation of Moshe Rabbeinu. As we know, Shlomo is LeMoshe. LeMoshe is Shlomo. This is King Solomon. The only difference between the two Neshamot is Moshe Rabbeinu understood all 50 gates of Bina, including Paraduma, red heifer, and Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, that was the smart of Mikol Adam, not from Moshe. He could not understand the red heifer. That's why it says, Rechoka mimeni. Rechoka mimeni is Gematria Paraduma, alluding that, only Moshe understood, not me. So here it says that now Yitro is coming, Vaishaklo, Vaishalu, as we know, Ish Lereu. They said that when Yitro, was coming towards Moshe Rabbeinu came out, and Aharon, his brother, and the 70 Zekenim, Sanhedrin, and Yoshua, and they came towards him to welcome him. And of course, we says, Vayomer Moshe Lochno ki yavo elai ha'am lidrosh Elohim. It says that, Yitro, as we mentioned, he says to him, I heard everything that's come to him, and I'm coming to ask about Hashem, and I know that he saved you from Egypt, and I did all of this thing with you. And all of a sudden, it says that, Ata yadati ki gadol Adonai mikol ha'amim, ki badavar hazeh zadu alehem. And as we know, Vayomer Yitro, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Adonai, Asher etzil etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. This is, by the way, when we say Baruch Hashem today, it's attributed to Yitro. Yitro, he says Baruch Hashem, meaning that Hashem is actually the God of all gods. This is the first time a giant man is in a stature of Yitro. In today's terms, imagine he's the Pope, or is so-called Muhammad. And he said, you know what, we're mistaken all these years. We need to become Jewish. There's only one God. He bring with him 1.7 billion people. In his times, it was equivalent to that. He brought millions of Midianites to the people of Israel. They all converted. It says in the Torah, Vayechad Yitro, Vayechad, he became one, he's also been circumcised. And as we know, in order to eat kosher, zevachim, you have to be circumcised. You have to be Jewish. And the Torah says, Vayikach Yitro choten Moshe ola vezevachim laAdonai Elohim. Vayavo el Aharon vekol ziknei Israel lechol lechem im choten Moshe lifnei haElohim. So he says here that Yitro brought sacrifice. But the first thing he brought, was bringing olah. Olah, by the way, is one of the sacrifices that first mentioned in the Torah in Akedat Yitzchak. When Avraham Avinu was asked his last and final test, that's the only one that the Torah called it a test, Asher Nisa et Avraham, Nisayon, he says to him, I want you to sacrifice your son, Yitzchak, the only son, as Olah. Meaning that, Olah is one of the sacrifices that everything burns. There is nothing left, and there is no truma, there is no sharing with the Kohen and the Levites or the Israel. It's one of the korbanot that has to be burned completely. In essence, what Yitro was saying here, he says, I want you to know that I am that level. I will be able to get to that level as Yitzchak and Abraham Avinu were, with my love to Hashem and the sincereness of my tshuva. And of course, we know that Yitro then he sits down and he eats with all the, as we call the VIPs of Israel, so to speak. And this is really when Yitro become one with the people of Israel. I want to mention here that in Brit Ben Abetarim, 400 years ago, in that moment, when Abraham Avinu had the Hashem revealed to him that his children will be 400 years in slavery, and the Torah says, Yado Teda, Vayomer Avram. That was before he was Avraham, because he was Avraham only after he was circumcised. But before that, when Hashem told him and revealed to him the prophecy of the slavery, he says to him, Yado Teda ki ger yeh zaracha be'eretz lo lahem. So we know here that Kadosh Baruch Hu revealed to Avraham, your children, there'll be a lot of gerim. There'll be a lot of converts, so to speak. We know we were all gerim. Ger aitem b'Mitzrayim. We started not Israel, not Jewish. We became the people of Israel only after we left Yam Suf. Yam Suf, as we mentioned, the Sea of Reeds. Yam is Israel matchilim, Sof Paro. That was the essence of the beginning of the Israeli. And the Jewish people became Jewish. The first Jew in the world is really everybody that stood in Mount Sinai receiving the Ten Commandments. That was the first Judaism in the world, so to speak. So Abraham was revealed that even Gerim, you'll have Ger Tzedek that will come and be Jewish people. Even though they were not Jewish to begin with, their neshamot have already embodied the Jewish neshama, and they will join the people of Israel in the future. Like Yitro, like Ruth the Moabite, like Rachav, the wife of Joshua, like as we mentioned, Herod, a lot, Yosef, the father of Rabbi Akiva, Shmaliah and Aftalion, two giants that was none other than the children or grandsons of Sancheriv, big neshamot that came to help the people of Israel. As we say, Yitro is from Yoter, he gave more. And now we get to what this is that he gave more, because we know Yitro, he comes, says, Vayhi mimacharat, vayeshev Moshe lishpot et ha'am. So, this whole section of Parashat Yitro, it's actually happening from the month of Sivan, which is really after, 7 weeks for coming out of Egypt. And from that moment until some say middle of Tishrei, the year of right now of this section is actually 2,449. Moshe Rabbeinu will receive the Torah, so to speak, the Ten Commandments, that would be on the 6th of Sivan, right? And that will be 2,448, the year that they came out of Egypt. But Yitro will be with him from that moment until he would receive the entire Torah 120 days later. And Vayhi mimacharat, that will be actually a day after Yom Kippur, the 10th of Tishrei. So we know if you take from the 7th of Sivan, when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the mountain, it was there for 120 days, 3 portions of 40 days at the time. And Yitro was with them. So the whole Parashat Yitro, if you take, is really from Sivan to Tishrei. And now, this says, Vayhi mimacharat, and that's actually the 11th of Tishrei. The people of Israel received the final portion of the Torah on the 10th, which was Yud B'Tishrei, Yom Kippur. And it was Shabbat. And Moshe, after Yom Kippurim, it says the Torah that he started judging the Am, the nation. So every time the Torah mentions Am, it speaks of the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav, Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching the oral Torah, Masechet Nezikin, damages. And they said, we want our money back. All the Erev Rav that came out of, they say, Chamushim Yatsu in Parashat Beshalach, on every Hebrew that came out, 5 Erev Rav joined them. Because they said, look, all our money left, Pharaoh is done, nothing in Egypt, what are we doing here? Let's go follow the money. They told us they're going to borrow for 3 days, we want to get it back. So they came to Moshe and said, we want our money. Moshe says, let's see your claim. And he says, how many years we were in Egypt? 210 years. There were 15 million of us, and you guys did not pay us. Let's do the calculation. And the people left, the Egyptian left. That's happened the same thing with Alexander the Great, Alexander from Macedonia, same thing. So now, Pharaoh, after, completely, I'm sorry, forgive me. YITRO, after seeing this whole event, he says to Moshe, what are you doing? First and foremost, you are a man of God. You should not be judging the people. What was in essence, YITRO was telling Moshe, he says, in order to maintain what your really essence in this world is not for you to judge the people. Even though, yes, you can. Every leader is also a judge. Every king of Israel is a judge. But you're not going to survive that. And I want you to, now YITRO is giving Moshe Rabbeinu an amazing, amazing advice that until today hold. He says to him, let's build a so-called judicial system, a system of judges, of courts, from the lowest to the highest, and vice versa. He says, I want you to choose people that can be the judges of Israel. He says to him, take Anshe Chayil, get the men of valor. Chayil in Gematria is 48, is also brain, moach. And as we know, the men of valor, Anshe Chayil, is people that really, 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 tzaddikim gmurim, most righteous, that do not ever will accept bribery, will not accept, any favor. Not like today, we see a horrific, no law everywhere in the world that people do whatever they want. Governments, there's no more, essence to truth and reality. And the one that sin, and steal or whatever, no punishment. Back then, YITRO says, no, you have to have good judges. The word shochad in Hebrew means bribe. Bribe, when you take bribe, you become chashud. The word shochad is chashud, is the same letters. And he says to him, I want you to take people like this that would be a man of valor, that basically could never be bribed, and will always stick with the exact words of Hashem and the halacha that we will teach them, and make them what we call minister of 1,000, minister of hundreds, 50 and 10, and so on and so forth. And basically, he says to him, it's not good what you're doing because you'll be destroyed. And after you do that, take my advice, shma bekoli. And I want you to basically, ve'ata techezeh, you are a prophet. You know who to choose. You know when you look at a person, who they are and what are they capable to judge. And you choose them and you'll see and give them instruction. He says to him, kol hadavar hagadol yaviu elecha ve'kol hadavar hakatan yishpetu hem. He says all the big things have them bring to you, and the little thing they can judge. In essence, this is a system that until today is working. There is of course, you can go from a small town all the way to the Supreme Court and vice versa. And after all that, Katuv Vayishma, now Moshe used the same words, Vayishma is Vayishma YITRO, Vayishma Moshe, Lekol Chotano, Vayas Kol Asher Amar. He did everything, but except one thing. The Torah says that Moshe chose Anshe Chayil. By the way, those Anshe Chayil, they also war heroes. The Zohar Kadosh says when Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Yoshua in last parasha, in Parashat Beshalach, Bechar lecha anashim, get yourself mankind, but there were specific men that were actually Anshe Chayil, that were the people that were born on a leap year on the second Adar. Anshe Chayil, those are people that the mazal doesn't control them at all. As we know, the people of Israel is above nature. It's above mazal. But there's a specific group that's known as Anshe Chayil, and they are actually above all. And those are the people that are born on the second ER. Moshe Rabbeinu was born also in Zayin Be'adar, in the 7th of Adar. The Gemara says he was Adar Bet. That's why he was above everything. And we know here, Moshe chooses Anshe Chayil, but he changes. He says to them, you judge everything, but Hadavar HaKasheh, not like what YITRO. YITRO says Hagadol. Moshe says the difficult, not the big, the difficult. As we know, Moshe Rabbeinu as he knew in the future he'll have difficult cases that he will not understand himself. For an example, the daughter of Tzlofchad, the 5 daughters that came to Moshe and says, our father was not part of Korah, we are, should get, the inheritance in the land of Israel, Nachala. Moshe did not know what to do. That's why he changed it to Hakashe, because there's a kushia, you have to go and ask, and he asked Hashem, and Hashem says they're correct. Same thing with, the Ben Sorar Umore, the son of Shalomit and the Egyptian man that actually cursed Hashem. And Moshe did not know what to do. And he asked Hashem, that was Davar Kasher, and Hashem says he should be stoned. Same thing with Tzlofchad himself, that was gathering wood. The Zohar Kadosh says that Tzlofchad, when he was gathering wood, the Torah did not mention his name. Why? Because he was actually doing Kiddush Hashem. Gemara explained to us that he did that right after, as we know, the Mishkan. And he says now people think, wow, the Mishkan, and they will not honor the Shabbat. And he did that to show them how important the Shabbat. And he was killed for it. Kiddush Hashem. So we say here, after all said and done, Vayishlach Moshe et chatno vayelech lo le'artzo. This is, as we mentioned, this is after Yom Kippurim. This is before Sukkot. They say in the year 2449, 1 year after they left Egypt. Because, they left Egypt, as we know, on the 15th of Nisan. And that's Pesach. And from that, you'll count 49 days. This is the 49 days. And you'll have Shavuot, Matan Torah. And the Torah says, "B'chodesh hashlishi letzet bnei Israel me'eretz Mitzrayim, bayom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai." So we know the people of Israel came out and left the area of Rephidim, as we know, where the war of Amalek that they defeated, and they come to Mount Sinai. That was the first of Sivan. The month of Sivan is really the month of what we call the first 10 commandment that was spoken, 2 by Hashem and 8 by Moshe. We'll get to it in a minute. But in a sense, they are now parked in around Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, before that, it was called Midbar Sin. And only Har Sin, after the 10 commandment, it will change to Sinai, Har Sinai. The Yud will be added. And of course, Vayikra, here we see a whole, almost in a sense, Hashem calls Moshe to go up and then send him down, come up, go down, back and forth several times, and to warn the people of Israel. But it says, I want you to know that, right now they're about to get, the 10 commandment. But he says to him, this time, he says, Vayikra elav Adonai min hahar, le'emor ko amar, Tomar levet Yaakov v'tagid levnei Israel. Hashem says to Moshe, speak to the house of Jacob. What does it mean? Why Hashem says speak to the house of Jacob and then speak to the people of Israel? So the Zohar Kadosh brings that Hashem says, I want you to speak to the woman first. The woman first. Bet Yaakov, that's why, by the way, we have a lot of Ulpena and Yeshivot for girls called Bet Yaakov. It came from here. Hashem, the Zohar Kadosh says, last time I spoke to Adam, not to Chava, and look what she did, she destroyed the world. This time, I want to actually speak to the woman first, and then to the men, because I do not want this Torah to be destroyed in the world again. In a sense, we know Hashem says, Ve'al titosh Torat imecha. You're not allowed to leave the Torah of your mother. One time in the Torah says, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, respect your father and mother. Another time it says, first respect your mother, then your father. So we know this is really the equal opportunity, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no anything that's not equal among men and women. In Judaism, actually, a woman takes a much major role in Judaism than any other nation, any other religion in the world. And as we know, Rabbi Akiva says, "B'zchut nashim tzadkaniyot nitzalnu, and b'zchut nashim tzadkaniyot ninatzel again." Because the righteous women were saved before, and in the future will be saved again. Not to mention, there's many, many, many righteous women. By the way, the Eshet Chayil that Avraham Avinu wrote as eulogy for Sarah is about all the women of Israel, all the Beit Yaakov. We know there are many, many secrets to it. I'll be happy to do a special class about it in the future. But for now, Hashem says, I want you to basically, I want you to tell them to get ready. But Hashem says, I'm going to make them my Am Segula. Am Segula is not the color purple. Segul is Kam Am Mesugal. You'll be capable of doing everything. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Jewish neshama that came from Adam, all of us, the Jewish people, we all come from one neshama. We're sparks of Adam because of the sin, this neshama was broken. And we're all part of that to do tikkun Adam. And as we know, it says, Betzelem Elohim bara oto, in the image of God. It's not really, Tzelem is not the image. Tzelem is not a form. Tzelem is the capability of God. We are godly. We are able to do a lot of things that God basically installed in us through this neshama. The word neshama, Hashem Natan. That's why when we speak, we have to be careful because we speak in the words of God. This is the capability of what Hashem put into us, and by nihil and nefesh chaya, and then we'll become alive. So we know here, he says, I want you to know, Ve'esa etchem al kanfei nesharim, I will carry you on the wing of an eagle. So eagle, as we know, is the largest, heaviest bird that could fly above all. Most birds, especially prey of birds and not birds of prey, regular birds, they always carry their hatchling or their chicks in their mouth or their talons because there's always somebody above can attack them. But the Nesher, the eagle, flies above all, and he put his babies and his hatchling or his chicks on his back, on her back. They don't really afraid of anything. That's how we are, the people of Israel. Hashem says, I'll carry you, al kanfot nesharim. Very much interested. There is a chazon that he will bring us to the land of Israel on the wings of an eagle. What's the wing of an eagle? It's really airplanes. When this was written, remember, the Torah is 333 years ago to date. We'll come upon, the receiving of Torah. That was 3,333 years ago. And the Kanfei Nesharim is really the technology of airplanes. Because, what's airplane? It carries people from place to place. And, most of the old airlines has the eagle as their logo. Kanfei Nesharim. Let's continue. And he says, I want you to tell them to be careful. They're about to come to surround the Mount Sinai, and they have to be basically very, very careful. Keep what we call a distance, and in 2 days, Hashem says. And then he says, I want you to know that Va'anochi ba elecha be'av ha'anan ba'avur ishma ha'am bedabri imach. Hashem says, I'm coming to you in Ayin Bet, Be'av. Bet, as we know, Ayin Bet is 72 in Gematria, is alluding to the name of God that has 72 letters. And it's very interesting, this parasha will have 72 verses. It's a very short parasha, but it has 72 against the 72, the name of Shem Hashem HaMeforash. Hashem says, I'm going to come with this name to speak to you. Basically, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I'm going to, in a sense, dilute myself in order for you guys not to, God forbid, be destroyed. Because lo yireni adam v'chai, mankind cannot see me and be alive. Their neshama can, but your physical, only 10 people were able to do that. And as we know, the 10 people that went to the heaven alive. But in reality, he says, Hashem says to him, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, lech el ha'am v'kidashtem hayom u'machar. Hashem's giving him a 2-day warning, so to speak. But he says, "V'chipsu simlotam," and wash your clothes. So we know really what wash the clothes is really, it says to purify, to go to a mikveh. Because their clothes, as we know, they had the clouds of glory that would clean them up. There was no such thing as anybody smell from odors or need to wash. The clouds of glory was the ultimate condition that their clothes grew with them. They were clean, they were Febrezed, they were air conditioned. And as we know, they had 6 clouds of glory surrounding them, 4 from each direction of the word news, north, east, west, and south, and above and below. And the 7th one would lead them in the desert. And of course, that during the day, and they had also the well of Miriam. And the well of Miriam is really what we call the Rolling Stone. The band Rolling Stone is taken after the well of Miriam. There was Hasela, the Torah mentioned the rock that Moshe, once he was actually instructed to hit it, and another time he instructed to just speak to it, teach Torah. This is the well of Miriam that went with them for 40 years, providing water, and each head of tribe used to draw from it water for the entire tribe. It says that when the people of Israel were coming to Mount Sinai, there were rivers of water among all the tribes, and each tribe was able to go to a mikveh. So we know here that it says to him 2 days. On the third day I will give you that. But come Moshe, as he says, by the way, Hashem warns him, says, be careful, whoever's going to come up could die. Kol hanogea bahar mot yumat. This is really putting a fence, a siyag to the Torah, Hashem, both physical and spiritual fences. And as we know, and after Moshe says that, of course, he goes to Hashem and he says, yes, they're ready. Nishma, naaseh. As we know, we have naaseh venishma. We'll do it and we hear. So this essence of those two words will come with the 10 Commandments in a minute. We'll see what does it mean, naaseh venishma. Why do first, then we listen. So we know here, ויהי ביום השלישי, בהיות בוקר, ויהי קולות וברקים וענן כבד. On the third day, the mountain Sinai is trembling. There is really an earthquake, so to speak. There's fire and smoke. Vekolot ubrakim, there's voices and light and thunders. And really, vayotze Moshe et ha'am likrat ha'elohim min ha'machane. The people were terrified. They said they actually were hiding in their tents. They were very, very, very terrified from what they hear and see and all this commotion and rumble. Moshe had to bring them back and there's to put them around Mount Sinai. ויתייצבו בתחתית ההר, והר סיני עשן כולו מפני אשר ירד עליו אדוני באש, ויעל עשנו כאש הכבשן, ויחרד כל ההר מאוד. Again, Hashem is ascending on Mount Sinai. And it's very interesting to see in a minute, the Torah says, וכל השופר הולך וחזק מאוד, משה ידבר והאלוהים יעננו בקול. Now, Hashem is doing a so test in a sense. He speaks to Moshe, but everybody can. So it's not just Moshe. In the past, Moshe would basically speak. Nobody hear what Hashem says to him, only him. And he will come and he speak to the people of Israel, speak to Pharaoh, speak to Aharon, speak to the 70. But this time, Hashem, everybody can hear Hashem now. And there is this whole amazing event of fire and smoke and the shofar. The noise, the blowing of the shofar goes stronger and stronger. When mankind blow the shofar, it's strong, then it goes slow. Then it stops. But this shofar went on and there was no echo. There was, if you ever, go scream in the desert, the echo come back to you, you hear yourself. And this kind, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Moshe spoke and the echo never returned, meaning that this is the echo, is the hedim, this is the echo of God that was in us and will continue on for generation. The noise will continue on, it will not come back and stop. And same as the shofar, and the people were terrified, even the mountain was terrified. It says, Vayecherad hahar, everything in creation has nefesh, and we just don't know it, but of course we see it today. It's called, in our technology, is atoms, atoms that move in speed of light within subject that you think is so-called a stone or even a table or whatever the case may be. And the Torah says, Va'elohim ya'anehu bekol. Hashem answers Moshe, kol, as we know, it's mentioned, hakol kol Yaakov. When Yaakov was able to receive the 12 tribes is because he was Tam Yoshev Ohalim. He was Torah and Mitzvot and sits with God. Ohalim is not really tense, is Elohim. And the call of Yaakov is really now, who are Yaakov? But the people of Israel hearing this voice that Hashem spoke to Yaakov to Abraham and Yitzchak, and of course to all our forefathers. And all the way to today with some giant rabbis. Vayered Adonai al Har Sinai el Rosh Har. So, Vayered, Hashem ascended. It's very interesting. The word Vayered, if you rearrange the letter, is radio. Really, hence the radio waves. Today we don't understand, but every technology that we have today, it's here in the world. We're just discovering it now. For an example, I'll give you, when Hashem says, Vaybaku hamayim, the water split all over the world, right? It's really the molecular level of water, H2O, 2 hydrogen and 8 oxygen. There's 8 atoms in oxygen, and combine, you mix it and it becomes liquid, or becomes steams, or become frozen. The clouds of glory, Hashem will show Moshe Rabbeinu everything in it, how to do, what to do. It's like really YouTube videos and documents and pictures. We hide our today in iClouds. It's really clouds of glory. Or here we see that the people saw the voice and the light, oracle, or the call, the combination of the two speeds that you put together. It's called sound. A lot of the technology that we see today, it's here. We're just discovering it. There's a lot more technology. There's time travels that many of our righteous Tanaim, or King Solomon and Moshe and Avraham, they know how to transfer people just by words from place to place. Really. So it says here, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe red ha'ed ba'am pen yarsun. It says again, he warned them. Now remember, Hashem talks to Moshe. Moshe goes up, comes down, up, comes down, up, comes down. But now Hashem does a trick with Moshe Rabbeinu. And I say a trick in a sense that really, he says to him, come, right? Vayomer elav Adonai, come to the mountain. And then he says to him, Lech red ve'alita, go down and back with Aharon and with the Kohanim, with the high priest, and ve'am al yarsun, and again, warn the people not to get close. So what's going on here? So, as Moshe Rabbeinu is ascending, all of a sudden, Hashem begins with the 10 Commandments. And Hashem says, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, Asher hotzeitcha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibet avadim. Hashem speaks now. The people of Israel below. By the way, there was no Erev Rav there. Only the people of Israel were there, physically, and the future neshamot that will convert and become Jewish. All of them. Atem she'omdim po ve'atem shelo po gam hem kiblu Torah. It says people that are here and not here receiving the Torah. Hashem specifically spoke the first 2 commandments. Why? So we know that, remember, the people of Israel, they came out of Egypt. They were at the level of 49 gates of impurity. One more gate that will never come out. And as we know, in order to purify them, Hashem waited 49 days to give them a lot of Torah teaching and take them out of Egypt. And they become a 0, minus 49 plus 49, 0, Ephes. With Hashem, we're 10, right? Echad and Ephes is 10. And very interesting, Hashem, when he says Anochi Hashem, he used the first letter of the Hebrew. Before, when Hashem gave the Torah, meaning Bereshit bara Elohim, by the way, the Torah was already exist according to Masechet Shabbat, in the tracket of Shabbat, Pechet Bet in 88.2, the Torah exists 974 Olam. He looked at the Torah and he created the world. The giving of the Torah to Moshe was really after 26 generation. Together is 1,000 generation. Hence that, 1,000 years in the eyes of Hashem is one day. In us is 1,000. But in a sense, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to speak the first and the second one. The first one, so first and foremost, people hear Hashem. Because, when you hear from the source, then they said, after the 2 commandments, Naaseh, we shall do. We heard Hashem. And when Moshe will speak 8, he says, Nishma, we'll listen to what he says, because we heard Hashem. Now, the first, Hashem says, the first commandment, the people, everybody died. The neshama left them. It's like a giant magnet. When you put it next to a little metal, all the metal immediately just veer towards this giant magnet. That's the neshama. It's part of Hashem. So the neshamot left, went back to the source. Hashem did chiyat hametim. First, he did that in order to purify them, right? In order to be able to sustain his voice and to receive the 10 Commandments. And the second one, they died again. in order to sustain them to continue to maintain the Torah for generations. Because you and I here watching and talking and learning together as a chavruta, we never received the Torah personally. Yeah, Neshama was there, but I was not. I don't remember Har Sinai. I'm sure you're not either, but we were all there. By doing that, Hashem really ensured that forever will be testament to the Torah. Hashem says in the Torah, don't believe me, know me. Da lifnei mi ata omed. By knowledge, by knowing, you are a testament to it. Da'at is adut. When you heard, Hashem says, I want you to hear me. So you don't just think Moshe is telling you things without mind say to him. And that's exactly what happened. And of course, Hashem bring the 10 Commandments. And as we mentioned, Hashem spoke to H2. Moshe's name is also Ohev. And Moshe spoke 8. Is really what Hashem did here is a very big chesed with Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu received the whole Torah in 120 days. As we mentioned, from the 7th, we got the 10 Commandments on the 6th of Sivan. Moshe Rabbeinu went up, and then he came back on Yud Zayin B'Tammuz. He broke the Luchot because the people did the golden calf. He went up on the 18th of Tammuz, and then he came back on the 29th of Av. Then basically went up again to receive the entire Torah, oral and written Torah. But he gave it to the people of Israel only before he died. Moshe Rabbeinu, as we know, he died in Parashat Vezot HaBeracha, the last parasha of the Torah, and he died 8 verses before the end. So Hashem did with him chesed. He said, you speak the 8th commandment, because you're not going to be able to write the last 8 verses of the Torah that I will give you to give every tribe. And that's exactly what happened. Moshe Rabbeinu spoke 8 in lieu of the 8 verses, and Hashem wrote, the Gemara says there's 2 opinions. Once Hashem wrote it, the second one, Yoshua wrote it. And Hashem basically, then Moshe was able, Parashat Devarim, by the way, the whole book of Devarim is only 36 days. If from the 7th of, from the Aleph of Shvat until the 7th of Adar, when Moshe Rabbeinu passes. That's the 36 days. Ele HaDevarim, Gimatria Ele. Moshe Rabbeinu really wrote and taught the Torah to the new generation and gave each tribe a set of Torah, and then one he put in the ark. Until today, the Torah, no matter where you go in the world, is the same exact, not even one mistake. Now, quickly, before we have, I know we're running a little bit over, but it's important for us to understand the 10 Commandments. Kadosh Baruch Hu, on purpose, he put the first 3 commandments about him. There is the right and the left side, right? We have, if you look at the so-called tablets, that was the first, by the way, Moshe Rabbeinu downloaded everything from the tablets, right? He knew everything. That was the first iPad, so to speak. I'm kidding. But it was really, tablets is not with a circle. The circle, just so you know, is a Christian thing. The tablets were square. As we know, the tablets, the Torah says, it gives it size. It was a square. 5 on the right, 5 on the left. The 5 on the right, the first 3 is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we know, Hashem says, Anochi Hashem, and Lo Yeh, Lo Tisa. And then after that, we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring the Shabbat. And then he bring parents. So, the questions ask why mankind did not come after God and then Shabbat. Shabbat came before mankind. So from here we learn that, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Et is Aleph through Taf. Respect everything that the Torah tells you. The Aleph through Taf, the 22 letters of Hashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought, those Sfat HaKodesh. By the way, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu ascended on Mount Sinai, there were 22,000 angels surrounding the mountain and the people of Israel. Against the 22,000, the Levites that will be counted, there will be Levi is Veli, is for me, is the tribe that doesn't count among Israel. And as we know, they don't have any portion of the land of Israel. We have to support the Levites and the Kohanim, that's part of the Levites. And the 22,000, each letter has 1,000 angels. That's how holy those letters are. And as we mentioned, HaKadosh Baruch Hu started with Aleph. He kept it for Matan Torah, not for the Torah. It was the most important thing. By Hashem says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am your God because I'm your God. Meaning that you are my children, you are my people. You will sustain the world. The Torah begins with Bereshit and ends in Israel. So everything in between is for the people of Israel. And everything that we do, whether for good or bad, has effect on the world. And Hashem says, Kedoshim tiyo kekadosh ani. Be holy, then I can be holy with you. In a sense, Hashem should have said, Ani kadosh, kedoshim tiyo. But Hashem said, no. It's not about one. It's about us together. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am because I'm your God. In a sense, Hashem, in his humility, sustain us with his power of knowledge of every letter. And every letter is very, very powerful. Every letter resembles a lot of, the Zohar Kadosh says Hashem put the Torah into Hebrew letters in order for us to, without any vowels, to understand the glimpse of it, only the 4 portions of understanding, as we call the pardes, the pshat, the remesh, the sod, and the drash, like the 4 levels, basic levels of understanding. And each word and each letter has many, many, many explanations. They know that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he placed the Shabbat before the parents, he basically says, it's more important, if parents tell you, let's go and do Chilul Shabbat, you allow not to listen to them. Shabbat comes before parents. In essence, Hashem also places on the left all the bad things, right? You have lo, you should not do, you should not do, you should not do. And each one of them is really placed according to what its divine purpose. For an example, if you take the first one, it says, Anochi Hashem, I am your God. And right across from it, it says, you shall not murder. Lo tirtzach. You're not allowed to murder. There's, by the way, a few mistakes in the Chumash, the stone Chumash. If you look at the English, for lo tirtzach, it says lo taharod. It says you should not kill. It's a mistake. It's not kill. You're allowed to kill. The Torah says, Haba leorgecha, shkem leorgo. Somebody comes to kill you. You can kill them, but you're not allowed to murder. And as we know, why Hashem says, because Ani Hashem, you're not allowed to take life. Only Hashem is the one. Don't be the judge of life. That's why we have no death penalty in Israel, because it says you shall not murder. The death penalty was issued only when the Sanhedrin came upon and when Hashem said it's the one, like we mentioned with Moshe and the Ben Soror Moreh says, yes, Ba'even tiskelu. This is really the Beit Din of Lemala and the Beit Din of Lemata. And as we know, let's say for an example, it says, Lo yeh lecha Elohim achem, you should not have the God. It's against Lo tinaf, you should not stray. Do not be with other men's wife and so on and so forth. Why? Because Lo yeh lecha, it's not for you. Whoever you have, this is what I want you to have. Many people mix the things between what they want and what they need. Hashem says, I will provide you your need. What you want is not good for you. And we'll look at the third one. Lo tisa is right. You should not falsely use Hashem's names in a swear. It's right across. You should not steal. When people get caught stealing, the first thing they say, I swear I did not take it. I swear I did not steal. Hashem says, no, don't swear in my name for what you're not supposed to do. And of course, Zachor lo ta'aneh, remember the Shabbat, respect the Shabbat. Lo ta'aneh, don't be a false witness. The Shabbat is really the essence of true witness. Shabbat is really Hashem stopped everything. And if you honor the Shabbat, you will sustain all the blessing in the world. As we know, the 10 Commandments has 620 letters. If you count the letters of the 10 Commandments, there's 620, alluding to the 613 mitzvot of the Torah and 7 mitzvot of our sages, the Rabbanan. The last 2 words in the 10 Commandments is Asher le're'echa, things that belongs to your friend. And it's really is the acronym of the 7th mitzvot from Rabbanan, from our sages. Asher le're'echa, Aleph is Avelut, Shin is Smachot, Resh is Rechitza, Lamed is Lechem, Resh is Reshuyot, Ain Eruvim, and Chaf is Kohanim. Our sages and the Anshe Knesset Agdola, they institute those 7 very important mitzvot that we are obligated as much as the Torah gave us the 630. And that's really the keter. When we do the 620, we are allowed to have this crown, this keter that's known as Torah. And as we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke the two commandments. Torah in Gematria is 611. 2 plus 611 is 613. Our body has 613 parts. As we know, 248 organs and 365 ligament. By the way, women have extra 4 parts. They have Ranav, 252 organs, because they give birth. And we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu also sustained us with those kind of mitzvot. We have 248 positive mitzvot and 365 mitzvot. And our obligation really to sustain and maintain all these mitzvot. Hashem says, everything you want, you can do. Just do it with Kedusha. You want to eat a good steak, that's fine. Make sure it's kosher. You want to be with a woman? Good. Make sure she is Kedushin. She's your woman. Whatever you want to do, you can. You can, but do it in Kedusha. Do it with Hashem Yirat Shamayim, what Hashem provides you. You can do it all. And as we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he spoke, the whole world heard, not just the people of Israel. You know, I mentioned before, Hashem says, Vayered. Hashem ascended. Vayered is radio. Today, everything in the world is driven by radio waves. Everything, every technology, every flights, every phone, every internet, everything is from the Torah. We're just discovering today. I'm going to finish this, Be'ezat Hashem, with thanking all of you for being with us online, and thank you for sharing everything. And again, thank you to Partners in Torah, amazing foundation, Mr. and Mrs. Selwyn Isako. God bless you all. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And Be'ezat Hashem, join us tomorrow and Thursday and Friday. We have classes. Really appreciate if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and push others to do so. It's free. And Be'ezat Hashem, our goal to reach 1,000. We are just started. It's our second month on YouTube. And Baruch Hashem, we have almost 5,000 viewers, not subscribers. Viewers, but we want to reach more. So we thank you so much. I'm Rabbi Dahan on behalf of Partners in Torah, Kol Ahavat Israel in San Diego. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and thank you again for everything.